Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Echo of Life. Let's start. Leo sat with his forehead pressed against the cool glass of the window. He was only 9, but his heart already carried the quiet weight of feeling unseen. His father rarely looked at him, and when he did, it was with eyes that held more distance than warmth. Leo learned early that no matter how hard he tried, how good his grades were, how quickly he obeyed, his father's affection seemed just out of reach. So, quietly and without words, he made a promise to himself. If he could just prove himself enough, maybe then he'd be noticed. Maybe then he'd feel loved. That silent vow traveled with him everywhere, into the classroom, onto the playground, through the school halls. He laughed at jokes that weren't funny. He shared his lunch even when he was hungry. He did other kids' homework just to hear a thanks or feel a pat on the back. For a fleeting moment, that small approval felt like warmth, the kind he imagined a father's pride might feel like. But here's the painful truth. Children who grow up searching for love that isn't given at home often become targets elsewhere. Other kids sensed Leo's eagerness, his deep need to be accepted, and some turned it into cruelty. They teased him. They gave him nicknames that stung. They left him out just to watch him try to win his way back in. Why does this happen? Why does a child longing for connection end up caught in cycles of rejection? Psychology points to what's sometimes called a fawning response, a survival strategy where a child learns to appease others to avoid pain and hopefully earn affection. Leo wasn't defiant or loud. He didn't fight back. Instead, he smiled when he wanted to cry. He apologized even when he'd done nothing wrong. He said yes when every part of him wanted to say no. He believed that if he made himself small enough, agreeable enough, helpful enough, maybe the hurting would stop. But desperation is rarely rewarded. Other children can sense it, even if they don't understand it. His kindness was seen not as strength, but as weakness. And so the bullying sharpened. Every mean word, every laugh at his expense, every shove in the hallway became proof of something he already feared deep down. That maybe he was the problem. That maybe he really was unworthy. This is how the cycle deepens. Neglect plants the seed. The cruelty of peers waters it until it grows into a forest of self-doubt. Think about that for a moment. Imagine being so young, so fragile, and having your sense of self rest entirely on the hope that one day you'll be good enough for someone to truly see you. Children don't rationalize neglect like adults do. They don't think, my parent has their own struggles. They think, if I'm not loved, it must be because I'm unlovable. That belief becomes the lens through which they see every friendship, every interaction, every relationship. For Leo, every classroom felt like a stage where he was performing for an audience he could never quite please. And when the applause didn't come, he blamed himself. Here's where it grows even more complex. When you're raised to please, your nervous system wires itself around other people's approval. Psychologists sometimes call this externalized self-worth. Your value depends not on who you are, but on how others respond to you. Leo didn't know who he was outside of others' opinions. If someone liked him, he felt a little alive. If they ignored him, he felt invisible.
You look just
If
like
they
your
mocked
father.
him, he believed he deserved it. This fragile dependency is part of why bullied children can remain stuck in painful patterns well into adulthood. You might wonder, why didn't he fight back? Why didn't he stand up for himself? The answer lies in something called learned helplessness. When a child tries again and again to earn love, safety, or acceptance, and consistently fails, they eventually stop resisting. Their brain learns that nothing they do changes the outcome. So they fold instead of fight. They whisper instead of shout. They say yes instead of no. This doesn't just make them vulnerable to bullying. It conditions them to accept unhealthy dynamics later in life, in friendships, at work, and in love. Leo's story isn't his alone. It's the story of countless children who sit quietly in classrooms, laugh too quickly at jokes, apologize for things they didn't do, all because they're secretly hoping someone will tell them they're enough. And here's the haunting part. The very thing they believe will save them, their endless pleasing, often becomes what draws harm closer. It's a painful paradox, but it's real. How many of us, even as adults, still carry a piece of Leo inside? How many of us learned as children that love must be earned through compliance? That we should laugh when we want to stay quiet, agree when we want to disagree, hide our true selves because we fear losing approval? This isn't just a child's story. It's a human one. When psychologists study children who were bullied, they often find lasting effects. Lower self-esteem, difficulty setting boundaries, anxiety around conflict, a tendency to overanalyze relationships. It's not because they're weak. It's because their early environment trained their brains to prioritize survival over authenticity. Leo's desperate attempts to win his father's approval became the blueprint for every connection that followed. He didn't just want friends, he wanted to be chosen. He wanted someone to say what his father never did. You are worth loving, just as you are. Picture this. Young Leo, after a day of being teased, comes home and sits at the dinner table. He tries to tell his father what happened. His father barely looks up. Maybe he says something dismissive. Maybe he says nothing at all. And in that silence, Leo's heart cracks a little more. The message is reinforced. No one is coming to save you. No one will validate your pain. So what does he do? He tries even harder to please. He decides that if he can just be perfect, perfectly obedient, perfectly kind, perfectly invisible, then maybe one day he'll be accepted. But perfection is a cage, and cages are where true selves slowly fade. How many of us carry invisible cages built by the neglect of others? How many of us are still trying to earn love from people who couldn't give it in the first place? The bullied child grows into an adult who still hears echoes of laughter in quiet moments, who still mistakes rejection for proof of worthlessness, who still feels the urge to bend in order to be seen. Here's where the real question opens. What happens when this child becomes an adult? Does he ever break free? Or does the pattern of pleasing spiral into every friendship, every romance, every workplace? Can a wounded child learn to become a whole adult? Or does the shadow of bullying and neglect linger forever, shaping every choice, every relationship, every belief about love? To answer that, we have to look deeper into the psychology of identity, how the mind of a bullied child becomes the blueprint for an anxious adult. Leo grew older, but the echoes of childhood didn't vanish. They simply took new forms. The boy who once shared his lunch became the young man who gave away his time, his energy, his very sense of self to anyone who offered the smallest sign of approval. He learned to read people's moods like weather, adjusting himself to keep the peace. At work, he stayed late, never complained, smiled even when exhausted. In friendships, he was the reliable one, always saying yes, never placing his own needs first. In love, he mistook conditional affection for real devotion, because deep down he still believed love was fragile, something he had to earn by pleasing, giving, enduring. But beneath the agreeable adult, the bullied child still lived. Every compliment felt temporary. Every relationship felt fragile. Every silence felt like danger. If someone didn't text back, his mind spiraled. If someone was upset, he assumed he was to blame. If someone pulled away, it felt like his father's indifference all over again. This is how psychology works. It weaves our early experiences into invisible scripts we act out again and again, often without realizing it. Neuroscience supports this pattern. Studies show that children who experience neglect or bullying often develop brains wired for vigilance and appeasement. Their nervous systems become hypersensitive to rejection. This isn't weakness, it's adaptation. The child's brain learns, if I can predict moods, if I can keep people happy, maybe I'll be safe. But what begins as survival in childhood can become a prison in adulthood. Constantly monitoring and pleasing others leaves little room for authenticity, for the messy, honest, imperfect self we all deserve to be.
Yes.
Leo's life,
Yes.
like so many who share this story,
No.
became a performance. He played the role of the agreeable colleague, the loyal friend, the selfless partner. And yet, late at night, when everything was quiet, he often felt hollow. He wondered why, despite giving so much, he still felt empty. The painful truth is this: you cannot fill the void of neglect with other people's approval. The applause of the crowd will never heal the silence of a parent. But here's what psychology asks us to consider. Can a child conditioned to seek love through pleasing ever break free? Can the bullied child learn to stop bending and finally stand tall? The answer is yes, but it requires an inner revolution. It begins with the simple, terrifying act of turning inward. For someone like Leo, silence had always felt dangerous. To sit with his own thoughts meant hearing echoes of rejection, whispers of "you're not enough." So he avoided silence by filling his days with tasks, favors, service to others. Healing began only when he dared to pause and ask himself a question he'd never asked before. What do I want? Apart from what others want from him. At first, the answer was only confusion. He'd built his whole identity around the needs of others. But slowly, painfully, he began to recognize his own desires. He realized he liked painting, even if no one praised him for it. He realized he enjoyed long walks alone, not because anyone joined him, but because it gave him space to breathe. And he realized that saying no didn't make him unlovable, it just made him human. Healing from bullying and neglect isn't just about learning boundaries. It's about redefining what love means. True love isn't earned through sacrifice or perfection. It isn't conditional on performance. Real love from a parent, a partner, a friend exists when you're accepted in your imperfect wholeness. Until someone like Leo believes that, they'll keep repeating the cycle of pleasing and pain. But what about the scars? Does the bullied child ever fully forget the laughter, the rejection, the silence? Scars don't vanish, but they can transform. They become reminders of survival, proof that you endured, and sometimes even sources of unexpected strength. Many who were once bullied develop profound empathy, an ability to sense pain in others with striking clarity. They know what loneliness feels like, and they carry a deep desire to make sure others don't feel the same. That empathy can become their gift, but only if it's balanced with self-respect. Empathy without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Empathy with boundaries becomes wisdom. Imagine Leo years later, standing in front of a mirror. He sees not just the reflection of a man, but the ghost of the boy who once begged for love. He knows that boy is still inside him, but he's no longer trapped by him. He whispers to that child, "You were always enough.
No.
It was never your fault." And in that moment, he feels something he spent his whole life chasing. Not applause, not approval, peace. The story of the bullied child teaches us something universal. We all long for connection. We all fear rejection. We all carry invisible wounds from times we felt unseen or unwanted. Some of us withdraw. Some fight. Some, like Leo, learn to please. But the common thread is this: our earliest experiences of love and neglect shape the architecture of our hearts. And unless we become aware of it, we spend our lives replaying old roles on new stages. So the question isn't only about Leo. It's about you. Where in your life are you still trying to please? Still trying to earn approval? Still trying to heal an old silence with new applause? What would happen if, for once, you stopped bending and simply stood as you are? What if love wasn't something to be earned, but something you deserved from the start? The end of Leo's story isn't about becoming flawless or finally winning universal approval. It's about reclaiming his right to exist as himself, even if not everyone claps, even if not everyone stays. That is the quiet victory every bullied child can one day claim. Authenticity over performance, self-respect over self-sacrifice, inner peace over outer applause. The bullied child believes survival comes from pleasing. The healed adult learns that survival, and more than survival, joy, comes from being real. Between those two identities lies a journey of courage, self-discovery, and breaking patterns so deeply wired they feel impossible to escape. But escape is possible. Healing is possible. And for anyone listening who has ever felt unseen, unwanted, or unloved, the truth is simple and unshakable. You are worthy. You always have been. Thank you for watching my video. Please subscribe my channel. For more update,